Welcome to Voices from Below, a podcast where we share the real stories and experiences of miners. Our aim is to foster understanding and positive change by highlighting personal experiences and insights without focusing on specific individuals or organizations. The views shared here are personal and not necessarily those of the podcast team. Thanks for joining us. Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Voices from Below. Today, we're once again speaking with Jesse. In this case, he's talking about being a surface blaster, and he's responsible for a lot of blasting tasks. Jesse, thanks again for joining us today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, buddy. Thanks for having me. Been a minute. Appreciate it.
So, could you start by giving a brief introduction of yourself once again, and then this time speaking a little bit more about what you've done with surface mining?
Yeah, for sure. So like in those, I guess I mentioned in the first interview, the 13 years, kind of going on 13 years of mining, got kind of getting into the surface mining and contract blasting for myself. So did a few projects around for local rock quarries, hydro projects, and some of the close proximity blasting that I've been doing locally in the area. So yeah, it kind of sparked that segue into surface blasting. So it's been a good experience. A lot different than underground, that's for sure.
Yeah. So you said a little bit about that, you just got into it, but like why specifically? Like, was there something that
it was
really caught your attention?
It was opportunity. Yeah. One of the diamond mines that I was at for underground, unfortunately shut down. And then, as any good miner would do, start handing out resumes and hunting for jobs. Had an opportunity to interview for a large explosive, well, actually one of the largest explosive companies in the world. They picked me up, and then I was sent over to Ontario and started my gig as a surface blaster. So I was able to apply a lot of those underground skills, safety measures. A lot of the handling of explosives is obviously really similar, but then went through a lot of their training because they did in-house training, which was just fantastic. And then, there's variables within surface blasting, lightning, other things, close proximity to buildings in town. This pit was right in town. So we had to design a lot of our shots specifically for how much we basically rattled the town's cage. So learned a lot there, right? That's how I got into that.
Yeah. So, specifically, could you just give a little bit more detail about, the differences between underground versus surface? I mean, specifically, with all that you talked about in the last episode.
Yeah, you bet. So on surface, a lot of the times, the timing. So I think I mentioned in that last interview, as for delays, it's a lot slower. I think our last holes that we were using, our last delays were around 9.4 seconds. On surface, it's 15, 25, sometimes maximum about 35 milliseconds between each shot, each hole itself. So you can fire off 300 plus holes, 1.2, 1.4 seconds. And then, for sensitivity, say if you're blasting along a high wall, I'm sure you've driven down a highway and seen all those nice half barrels that you can see where actually the drill steel went down. And it's like, oh yeah, that looks nice. I don't know if you do that. Obviously I'm a mining nerd. You notice those things, but you use a higher velocity explosive to actually create that knife edge cut on your high wall or when you're initiating a new bench. So you have high velocity explosive that you mix with your similar bulk explosive that you use underground, but you have the high velocity explosives that you use for your pre-shear, it's called. And then you have to then obviously say if I'm blasting for myself, for example, if I'm at I was contracting at a mine, for example. They hand sorted their ore, obviously with equipment, but if it's going to be a waste or an ore shot, you have to then time your shot to either pull or push in the direction that you want it to go. So it's pretty crazy when you think about it. And I learned this through surface mining because underground, you can't stand there and watch it. You don't really get to see how it behaves. On surface, you actually get to physically, you're 100 meters away, you're looking down in the pit, and you get to actually physically watch how this explosive behaves. So you learn a lot by just watching how that timing actually affects which way the muck goes, right? So if you're going to be shooting into a waste shot, you want to keep that waste with the waste. You don't want to have dilution. That's again money and cents. Dollars and cents is the main aspect of if it's going to make or break a mine, right? So you want to pull or push that muck a certain way. And even designing a shot where for sensitivity, for example, like we were in town in Ontario, and instead of having just one primer and shooting off, 200 kgs, so that's, what is that? It's 400 pounds of explosive per shot. You'll actually double prime, so you'll load. And I think I mentioned collars back in the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
You don't load the full borehole, so you'll put your primer down with your booster, obviously a bigger booster, right? Bigger bang to get that. And the holes are bigger, right? We were actually loading 4-inch holes. In some surface mines, they're like 10 to 12-inch holes. So you got, compared to underground 90-gram boosters, you have 200 to 450-gram boosters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot bigger punch, a lot more volume. You're dealing with, 13,000 kgs of explosives. So it's, what is it, 2.2 pounds to a kg. So what is that? Almost 20,000 pounds of explosives that you're letting go. So, you double prime, for example, you'd load stem. So you put your stemming, which is gravel. So on surface, you actually have to confine that borehole. So you'll load, I'll use rough math, 10-foot hole. You'll load up to 7 feet. You'll actually put gravel the last 3 feet of that hole. So envision like a piston in an engine, right? It needs to be confined to explode and create that energy for your engine to run. Explosives are the same way, but on surface, you really need to pay heed to that, because that creates a nice controlled blast. You're not blasting fly rock all over the place, and you want to confine it, but you also want to get your fragmentation. So there's a lot of tricks of the trade that you can use to either desensitize the explosive. Air decking, you leave an airspace and then you stem, or you trace it with det cord, because you kind of play with the velocity of the explosives, right? You know that, for argument's sake, again, some of your bulk explosive fires at 15 to 18,000 foot a second. Your det cord fires at 20,000 foot a second. Well, we're going to trace the back holes with det cord. That way you're not over breaking into the next pattern that's already drilled beside you. So a lot more technical in that sense of precision for surface, for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. So with all this stuff, I noticed, there's seems to be relative crossover with, the last episode. So, would you say that the skills that, if you're to, let's say, start in surface or start in, underground, would you say that most of those skills are very transferable to the other? Or, is there some stuff that, you're just not going to use at all? I mean, I know you said there's some differences, but are they still pretty similar?
I would say they are very similar, but a lot of them, especially for surface, I would say being a surface blaster really, it was a great opportunity for me, and it made me a better underground blaster, because now, yeah, on surface, like I said, you get to watch it. It's a lot more technical. Like if you don't stem a hole properly, you'll see the effect of that energy. It's going to go the path of least resistance. Instead of that energy going within the rock and breaking the rock, it's coming out of the hole, and you're shooting a cannon. And then when they're digging it, you can physically see, like, oh shoot, that's where we had a couple problems within that pattern, for example. And it's tight digging. It's hard for the shovel to get through it, right? So luckily I had that opportunity to go into surface and then take those skills back into underground. So I would say, like, me being a surface blaster definitely honed my skills and made me a better underground blaster, because you get a better understanding for how the explosives work, because like I said, on surface you have to play with it a lot more. You have to really design your shots, pounds per delay, right? No, 500 pounds per delay per hole, it's too much. We're going to break windows, we're going to rattle the town, or it's just going to it's too much energy. So you'll either double prime it with a different delay, so now you got 50 pounds per delay instead of 100 pounds in that one borehole, or which way you want to pull or push the muck. So when I came underground again, if I knew we were turning, for example, instead of just blasting it regularly and the muck piled against the wall, now you can play with it and play with the timing, and now you can design that shot to actually pull that muck to the inside corner. And it's quicker mucking for the guys. So, and there's a lot that goes into it too, like outside of just the explosives. Like, you got a lightning storm coming. Well, it's like, well, what do you do? There's no lightning underground. Thankfully,
Yeah.
that'd be pretty wild.
I hope not. Yeah.
yeah. But what do you do then, right? what processes do you apply? Like, are you burying now the detonators? You have to evac the pit. There's a certain radius that you gotta to evacuate the pit. Obviously, if you have live charge holes now, you're getting a hold of aviation. Say when I blast for myself, you're calling the local airport and okay, where are you flying today? This is my GPS location where I'm blasting because, is it a clear day? That shock wave instead of underground going through the tunnel and it's not really affecting the atmosphere outside. Now on surface, that shock wave affects a larger radius, right? You know, Even if it's a low ceiling, cloudy day, that shock wave will actually hit the clouds and resonate throughout the bottom of and resonate outwards.
Wow.
So, oh yeah. Like you can rattle windows 5-10 kilometers away if you're shooting in a low ceiling atmosphere or a low pressure atmosphere, right? Compared to a nice bluebird day, it's gorgeous. That shock wave is just going to go within the atmosphere. It's not going to rebound off any low pressure, and it's out of your hair.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's things like you didn't think about those things until you got into the business, and it's like wow, there's a lot more intricacies within the surface mining aspect, right?
Yeah. So in that case, would you say that like you think that, people who are, blasters on surface or underground, do you think that they should do both? Like, is that something that you would like highly recommend or
Oh,
not necessarily?
100%, man. Yeah, that'd be a great opportunity for people.
Uh-huh.
I worked with a lot of guys in both aspects, and even men and women. I shouldn't just say guys. Many
Yeah.
people that have blasted, and they go, oh man, I wish I had that opportunity. That's unbelievable. Even the surface people. Oh, I wish I could go underground.
So it transfers the other way too. It's
yeah,
not just
exactly.
okay.
And even for the underground, people. I was just with a fella. We were talking about stoping. You're creating, instead of just your normal blast profile, you're creating like an 80-foot deep, 200-foot deep cave in the ground, right? But you're applying that timing, and the holes are bigger, so it kind of mimics the surface blasting. But unfortunately for the underground, it's not really unfortunate in a sense of like it's all designed and engineered, but as a blaster, you're almost now just plug and play. For the underground, you don't really get to see how it behaves, but on surface, yes, it's still engineered. And if you're blasting for yourself, you engineer it yourself, but you get to actually physically watch it. So you get to apply those skills back to underground and then vice versa, right? Underground, there's a lot of things and variables that you could also apply that can make you successful in surface blasting as well.
Yeah. No, for sure. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of the things that could be somewhat dangerous for planes or windows or anything like that. But would you say that there's still a lot of, or at least some risk involved for you guys when you're actually setting them off, or no?
Oh, for sure. Like there's always that risk of fly rock now. At least underground, you're up and around the corner and you're shooting from a safe distance, and you're just dealing with the shock wave. Now on surface, you're dealing with the fly rock. You're dealing with any variables. Again, like we're blasting in BC and sedimentary, so there's a lot of different characteristics within that rock. So you can send you can send rock 300 meters pretty quick. It's easy to do it, and also again you're using a lot more volume instead of like a couple thousand pounds underground. You're using 15 to 20,000 pounds sometimes on surface. 13,000, 10,000 kgs is not an uncommon. 15,000 kgs is not an uncommon thing, right?
Don't you guys have barriers though? I mean, is there not
Oh
something?
yeah, you got barriers, you got all kinds of safe differences like in a mine when you're blasting, but sometimes you don't have those options when you're blasting in a quarry. When I've been blasting in a quarry close to a highway, you obviously you have flaggers and stuff like that. Even myself, I was doing a little project in town, and luckily I've written some tests. The government has now allowed me to blast within 300 meters of an occupied structure, which it's great for weight loss because the stress is just immense. But you got to really pay attention to what you're doing. Like you have to break the rock because obviously that's what you're paid to do. And equipment wise, you don't want to damage equipment. If the rock's too big and the equipment's not big enough, that's the big thing too. How big is your gear? How much explosive do I need? How big do I need to get this muck? And then where are your obstacles, right? And then it's so much more violent. Like you're setting off, instead of underground, your basic maybe shot is 68, 72 holes. That's a really, really small blast for surface. Like you're shooting off 20, 220 to 350 holes on surface, and your hole diameter is double, quadruple the size, and you're using sometimes 6 times to 8 times more explosives. So it's a lot more violent. It's a lot more energy that you're trying to harness. And with any time you detonate explosives, once you push that button, it's game over. You can't just stop it. It's you're kind of subject to until that last hole fires. So yeah, it's definitely, there's definitely a risk for fly rock and stuff like that. You got to be careful. You got to listen to the driller, and if you're drilling it yourself, you got to really pay attention to the rock dynamics. How did it behave? Did you hit any voids? Did you hit any slips or any characteristics that would impede anything that for those products to act as they should, right? Because you can get caught pretty quick. I've seen it. Even stemming, for example. I'll go on stemming. You bridge a hole and a rock turns sideways, and you don't have full confinement in that hole. Well, it's time. It's cannon. It's going to fire a cannon, and that shock wave is coming out. And if you got any clouds, you're going to be rattling windows 10, 15 kilometers away, if not breaking.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I just want to mention for the people listening, if you want a little bit more explanation into what he's talking about, you might want to check out the last episode where we discussed a little bit more of this in a little bit more detail. But yeah, so just going on to the next question. So I know we talked about this a little bit last time, but do you ever, what's the protocol for, let's say, if something doesn't go off or something malfunctions? Because I know, compared to last time, there's a lot more explosives that we're talking about. So is there a difference in how you guys handle it, or not really?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of the times, you have different indicators that'll tell you whether or not you had a misfire. So on surface, you can't always reload. At least underground, you can get in there and typically either wash it out, blow it out, reload the holes. But now that you have stemming on top of it, or that hole now is just completely, it's just done, but you still have live explosives. So now, as a blaster, you have to direct a shovel to come in there and carefully dig it out. You have certain parameters that you can dig close to it. Yes, man, I know. Isn't that something? But what do? You just can't leave it. Now you got a mountain in the middle of a pit, right? You got to get rid of it. So you have to carefully dig around it, expose it, and then once you can properly, under supervision of the blaster, that's what I mean. Those skills, now you got to be completely on your A game. You got to know what you're doing, which direction that hole went. Did they deviate? And that's the problem with surface too, right? Longer holes, more deviation in the drilling. It's not straight up and down. It's gonna weeble wobble. It's gonna go different places. So where is that charge? You started over here, and by the time it gets to the bottom, it might be 10, 15 feet in a different direction, right? Damn. So you're slowly directing an operator to dig around it. And if you can expose it, well, perfect. Then you can get the stemming out. Either you take a hydrovac machine, or you blow it out with air. A lot of the emulsions now you use, instead of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil, it's kind of like a water-based, it's still ammonium nitrates, but it's a different design of explosive. You can actually blow that stuff out. So then you're either in there blowing it out, or you got a machine that's once you can expose the actual, get the stemming out, 9 times out of 10, all it takes is to reprime it and put a new primer, which is a detonator and a booster, because you still got your bulk explosive in that borehole, and then you can deal with it. You can bang it out, right? But you have to get at it. You can't leave it. You got to essentially a ticking time bomb just sitting there, and you're not going to barricade it off and drive around it for the 30-year life mine. You got to get through it somehow. So yeah, there's definitely procedures that are in place to do so, but it's a little bit different than underground for sure.
And yeah, so going back to kind of the differences for a second, on one of the other podcast episodes, we talked with someone who was in Australia, and they also had been in they call it open cut there, and underground as well. And he was saying that the culture that he'd experienced, because I know in the last episode we talked a little bit about the people down there, and how important they are in underground. Would you say that there's a little bit less of a kind of family dynamic on, the surface, or is that not the case?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good call. There is. It's a weird thing. Like for underground, I don't know if it's because you're down there and everyone's risking their life and it's dangerous and you're dealing with a lot of kind of crappy conditions, right? So you're in it together. Um, you do see that a bit of a different bond. Nevertheless, like when I was surface mining, there's some great people out there. Um, you're still grinding away. Like when I was in Ontario, it's minus 55, and you're out there working with the boys and the team, and there's drills turning and trucks running. Like you definitely have that bond. But it's weird. It's a weird thing. Underground, there's nothing like it. It's a way different atmosphere. So you do create a bit of a different bond, but I mean, I think on surface you still have those great relationships, right? You build them as you come, and I've kind of brought that with me. Luckily, that attitude, I'm kind of always an underground miner at heart, but you bring that attitude towards that surface operation, and you can still create those atmospheres that way as well. But yeah, I know that gentleman, whoever commented on that, he's not far off. It's a different relationship, which is kind of funny, right? You think it'd be the same.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, so I mean, you obviously have been in both underground and surface, but is that not entirely common? Like, do people generally stick in one for their entire career, or is it pretty common for,
Yeah,
eventually for them to switch around?
I would say a lot of the mass percentage of people that do mine, they're either sticking within that industry. I fluked out. I took an opportunity, ran with it, made it successful for myself. Um, I think that what a lot of drives me is like I'm a big mining nerd. I love mining. I live and breathe it. I mine on my days off. Who does that? You
Wow.
know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's not a common thing to have an individual be able to bounce from both industries. There's people that obviously do it. I'm not the one off, but most people, I would say, yeah, they stick it out. And some people, like a lot of guys, a lot of people on surface that do mine on surface, they want nothing to do with underground. You know, there's
That's
projects that
that's
start off,
fair.
yeah, they start off as open pit, and just because the pit design, the ore body transcends deeper into the ground, but instead of having to push back the pit and take a lot more waste, a lot of projects then decide to go underground, right? And you talk to some people. I was just recently at a project that is going to be making a transition underground, and some people are like, I want nothing to do with that. Are you kidding me? Going down there? Like, no. I like sunshine, and I like surface mining. So there's and then same with the underground. There's a lot of good people that work underground. They're like, no man, surface is this is exciting down here. This is more thrilling. So I like them both. I took the opportunity in that sense and learned from both industries. Because they're both applicable when it comes to blasting.
For
For
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
and for someone who's, thinking, "Hey, should I go, underground or surface?" I mean, what would you say to them in terms of like, how they should be assessing what they exactly want, with that?
Well, yeah, like it depends on what you want with your career. If you want to have a long lasting career in the industry, I definitely highly recommend to be able to get experience in both. Mining is a huge part of, you know, the economic power of North America, even all over the place, right? So if you can try to get into both, do your best to do so, and especially as a blaster, if you want to get into blasting, I highly, highly recommend getting into surface blasting so you get to physically, because you're just dealing with so much more power, and um it's a little bit more intricate in a sense of that muck dilution, right? And the variables that you can, and the tricks that you can do on surface to then apply yourself to underground. There's a lot of tricks underground as well that you can apply to surface. So if you can try to do both, it's a huge win for somebody, because mining is, you could be going hard. I was at a diamond mine, we were going hard, blasted that night, and all of a sudden the day shift came in, and it was, guess what, guys, mine shut down. There's three 737s coming up to pick you up. Yes. So
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it happens all the time. Projects all of a sudden tank, and you're then looking for a job. So if you're looking to get into the industry, try to definitely open up that spectrum for yourself, so you're that much more employable in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, and then in terms of the treatment of you or people in any position that you've seen your friends or anyone else, do you think that there seems to be a little bit of a difference in how you guys are treated, whether it's surface or underground, or is it relatively the same?
I would say underground, honestly, there's a lot more grit involved. You got to have a bit of a mean bone in your body sort of to endure those conditions, especially development mining. You got to have some grit, and there's a lot less please and thank yous. It's, hey buddy, that's your job, get down there and get it done. And it's just because of the environment that's produced underground, right? Like it's wet, it's dirty, it's gross, it's all kinds, right? But that's what you're hired as a professional to do that. Fortunately on surface, there's the conditions are a lot better. Yes, you are dealing with the environment, minus 50, or plus 30, that also sucks. I'm not saying one's easier than the other, but I think surface mining, it's a little bit more gentle. It's just, it's not as grimy. It's not as, you don't need as much grit to get through that day to day. It's still hard. There's still people out there grinding away and giving her. That I'm not going to take away from surface mining whatsoever. But in the sense of maybe that environment, I would say surface mining is just a little bit more gentle of an approach.
For sure. And because last time you said a little bit about the common misperceptions of sorry, the common misconceptions of underground blasting and or just mining in general. So I was just wondering if you could say a little bit about if there's any misconceptions about surface, about what you guys do, or what underground miners think that you guys do at all.
Well, there's always that coming from both industries. Once you go from underground to surface, you're kind of labeled as the sunshine miner. And so, it's one of those perceptions where, oh yeah, sunshine miner must be nice. Hey, you're getting a suntan up there. It's not as cracked up and easy as what the underground guys think as well. You're out there, like I said, dealing with the elements, the wind, the cold, the rain, and it's bigger gear. You're, instead of a 60-ton haul truck underground, you're dealing with 300-ton haul trucks. And it's not like they're driving Miss Daisy to Sunday school. Like they're driving in winter conditions, rainy, slippery conditions. You got a loaded 300-ton haul truck that's starting to kick sideways. You got to be a skilled operator. And I hand my, kind of hang my hat to those individuals that operate the gear underground. I mean, on surface, right? Like they're dealing with a lot bigger gear, and you got to deal with the environmental aspects, that the weather, the weather can change, especially when, a lot of times mines are in some of the most remote, hostile conditions. So, at 10 o'clock in the morning could be bluebird, and then all of a sudden 1 o'clock in the afternoon it's snowing and blowing, and the pit's still running. And that's another thing. Like underground, typically you don't shut anything down. It's go, right. There's no, unless you have a ground fall or influx of water, the ventilation or power goes down. A lot of the times with surface, like if the weather comes in, the pits have to shut down. There's either you keep the drills turning or the shovels digging and stockpiling, but sometimes you got to shut down the dozers, the haul trucks. And if the lightning comes in, you got to evac the pit. So that misconception of, oh, you're a sunshine miner, must be nice, you scratch the scratch and win ticket. No, it's just as hard. It's just different, right?
You're a lightning miner instead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just kind of looking a little bit, past just surface and just surface and underground combined, just your entire career. What would you say that you're most proud of that you've accomplished or seen or anything like that?
I think that my biggest accomplishment, honestly, is I'm a fourth generation miner in my family.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something that I've always strived to do. Like I said, I think in the first interview, grew up listening to those mining stories, and I think a lot of people that get into the game, it's in your blood. Is somehow you either love it, or it's in your blood, right? And I think my biggest accomplishment, honestly, is to be able to carry on the family history and the family trait, right? And I take a lot of pride in that, and that's kind of why I think I just take those opportunities and try to be the best in that given opportunity that you can be in, because at the end of the day, I want to kind of make my family proud. And my grandfather obviously passed away with every heavy mineral within his system, and he's mined all
Rest in
through
peace.
Canada. but it's he left this place as people talked about him like he was a good miner.
Mm.
And a lot of families have that. You'll listen to it as you interview more people, like, my grandfather or my dad or whatever, like, he was known as a really great miner. So I'd like to leave that legacy behind.
So you mentioned that, you have kids. Would you support them, if they wanted to, continue and be, fifth generation then, going into the mining industry?
I think that'd be a huge achievement on my end. I got a placer claim, so I mine, and on my days off, like I mentioned, I got a little placer gold claim and a little gold mine and mineral claim, and my daughter rolls her eyes at me like, "Oh, Papa, no, we got to go to the mine now." But she's really interested in rocks, which is another aspect. Like, you don't have to just be a miner. So if one of my children ever wanted to get into the industry, I think that'd just be amazing. That if I influenced that and there was a fifth generation of us in the mining industry, I think that that'd be just incredible. That'd be incredible, man.
Yeah.
A lot of pride in the industry, right? It's one of those industries that has a lot of pride. There's those big four: logging, fishing, mining, those oil and gas, and there's a lot of pride within those industries and family history. So if you could kind of keep that trend alive, that'd be unreal, right?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of going on to the last question, kind of keeping this up. So, you said that your grandfather, you're saying, he was a good miner. So with that in mind, looking back at what you've done so far, what you're going to, hopefully keep doing and all that, how do you want to be remembered by those you work with?
I think I want to be remembered like, my grandfather was always known for his stories, his sense of humor. It runs in the blood. And I want to be remembered as that, someone that could tell a good story, kind of lit up the room, made those cold, windy days or those horrible conditions underground kind of fun.
Yeah.
We had a good time with that guy, and and professionalism. I want to make sure that the legacy I leave behind is, I did a good job. Obviously, I was professional. I did great work, hard worker, but kept people safe, kept myself safe. Like nobody was ever kind of at risk with you. So to leave a legacy behind would be, this guy was a hard worker, good storyteller, and one hell of a miner.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jesse, once again for coming on the podcast, man. This has been great, and I really appreciate you sharing all your insights so far.
Hey, man, I appreciate that, and to your listeners out there, I hope that if you can inspire a few of us to get into the game, that'd just be unreal. So, thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, who knows? We might even have a part 3 in the future. So
that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome.
All right, Jesse. Well, thank you so much, man. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay, buddy. Cheers.
I'll catch you later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Voices from Below. If you or anyone you know wants to be featured on Voices from Below, you can reach us at voicesfrombelowpodcast@gmail.com. That is voicesfrombelowpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to catch you in the next episode.